going. Cool. Okay. Well, look, we've got a decent number to actually get to know each other a little bit on the call as well. And the purposes of this series of Zoom sessions has been to help to piece together and to really learn from people who've already been taking action or making moves towards campaigning on childcare, so that we as a network of people can kind of really learn from that and also take that into our own thinking and planning on a future campaign for better childcare. So if we can just quickly go around, we'll have a decent amount of time with Lee to really learn from the work that's gone on in Salford, but perhaps if we can just take a few minutes each to introduce ourselves and explain just what brought you here, like what your particular interest is in childcare. So if I go first, and then I'll call you out because I feel like I can see everyone. I'll pick on you, I'm afraid. So yeah, I'm Lucy. I work at the New Economics Foundation, and I'm also a director of the Friendly Families Nursery, which is a new parent-led nursery in Deptford in Lewisham. NEF has been working at a policy level, trying to unpick what has gone so horribly wrong with childcare for parents in England. And we've put out a couple of publications like the Quality Childcare for All paper, and more recently the Childcare Infrastructure Fund, which is a costed policy to save and reform the childcare sector during COVID. I'm actually leaving NEF at the end of November, but I'm going to be continuing to work on childcare, and particularly focused on supporting practical approaches to innovating around childcare provision. But NEF continues to work on childcare policy and childcare campaigning as well. And Miranda, who's on the call, will be leading a lot of that work as well. But if we go around then, Maud, you're next on my screen. So do you want to introduce yourselves?
Thank you, Lucy. I'm Maud. I work at the University of Bristol, and I found out about this coalition through Claire English and the women's strike organising. And I'm just finishing my first book, which is called Contemporary Childcare Struggles, which looks at different kinds of childcare struggles, some in Australia by childcare workers who have gone on strike over the last few years, and then more recently the organising of nannies, including the work that Veronica and others have been doing, which is really exciting. But right now I feel like I'm mostly teaching undergraduate students and trying to get our local UCU branch to pass a motion so that lecturers don't have to teach face-to-face and be exposed to COVID in such large numbers. But yeah, anyway, so these are all the things that I'm doing, but I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to hear Lee as well.
Thanks so much, Maud. Zoe, you're next on my screen. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Okay, I'm Zoe, and I've been running Children's Day Nurseries and other childcare provision for over 30 years now. That's my day job. I run a social enterprise with charitable status. We operate a kind of cross-subsidy model. So we have nurseries that are profitable in affluent areas, subsidising nurseries in areas of social disadvantage. One of the things that has intrigued me over several years are the comments that staff make to me about how different it is working for us compared to previous experiences with some of the big corporate chains. And they say things like, well, because there it's all about the money, and we're here it's all about the children. And I'm trying to unpick that a bit. So I'm also doing a part-time PhD at Royal Holloway, looking at what are the influences facilitating and hindering ethical childcare, using the ethics of care as a perspective and practice theory, because I'm trying to unpick the detail of what do they mean when they say it's all about the children as opposed to all about the money, and how does that change the kind of provision that is taking place in the nurseries. Oh, I forgot to say I'm up in Milton Keynes, Northamptonshire, Bedfordshire. That's my patch.
Thanks, Zoe. It's really exciting stuff. I'm really looking forward to all of that research you're doing as well. Kate, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks. Hi everyone. I'm Kate Hardy. I work at Leeds University, and I'm a researcher in work and employment relations, and particularly around feminised work and women in work. And I'm working on a project with Xanthi, who's also here, and quite a few others at Leeds and Bristol, looking at the impact of COVID on the childcare sector, which I've been in touch with quite a few of you about. And the idea is, to look at really the ways in which COVID has exacerbated what everyone here will already know about the difficulties of working in the sector and sustainability and state support for the sector. So it is about the impact of COVID, but with a view to have kind of longer term kind of interventions in the sector. And when I talk about the sector for this project, we are including nurseries, but also childminders, nannies, working formally and informally, and also parents and grandparents. So it's a kind of 360-degree look at how care might be redistributed and what the really kind of key points of problems are, and where the real weaknesses are in the system, and particularly for more vulnerable groups and people who are kind of faring worse in the pandemic.
Thanks so much, Kate. Xanthi, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I mean, Kate said a lot. I'm working on this big project with Kate. I'm also, my background is in work and employment relations. Yeah, I don't have too much more to add than that. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Veronica, do you want to go next?
Yes, hi. So I'm Veronica. I've been a nanny for 8 years, and I'm also an organizer with the Nanny Solidarity Network. So we're a London-based group that provides mutual aid, support and resources and space for collective action for nannies. So we're migrant-led, and our members are largely migrants. And so we're kind of looking at immediate provision at the moment of things like hardship funds, emergency housing, but hopefully longer term we can sort of extend our reach and think a bit more broadly. But at the moment it's very much putting out fires. So yeah, that's what we've been doing. Cool.
Thanks, Veronica. And like I was saying, Veronica's going to do a more detailed session next week, so I'll send the details of that round to everyone to join that as well. Caroline, you're next on my...
Hi, yeah, I'm a counsellor in Hackney. I'm cabinet member for early years, and we're reviewing our early years strategy right now. So it's very useful to hear some ideas. And we're also reviewing our funding formula and our grant support for PVI as we go into this sort of second period of restrictions. We're kind of concerned about loss of some of our playgroup workers in Hackney. We've seen a massive reduction in our childminder sort of offer for various reasons. I'm leading a child-friendly places supplementary planning document just now, and sort of engaging quite a lot of work around sort of child-friendly cities, and I think that kind of access to childcare and general provision for early years as part of this kind of what's within almost 10-15 minutes, you know, the idea of a 15-minute city and so on is really interesting around that. I'm part of Hackney Schools group board, which is focused on belonging, and there's quite interesting work there around compassionate leadership through the pandemic, stuff which I think could be useful in the longer term, particularly in terms of supporting children with special educational needs. So it includes things like you know, tolerance of behaviours, etc., stuff that you'd like to see in a more inclusive culture anyway. So I think there are some positives within the pandemic. And also wanted to flag with anyone here that's interested that I don't know if you've come across Ruth Talbot, who's leading on a single parent motion about sort of having single parents recognised within the Equalities Act, and that's going to be coming to Hackney Council as a motion, I think, in January. So I know she's keen to sort of engage with people within a wider network who might support that campaign. So just wanted to flag that.
Thanks so much, Caroline. And I'm going to chase you up afterwards because I've got a friend in Birmingham who's really keen to understand more about how Hackney has signed up to be a child-friendly city and what they can do in Birmingham to do more of that too. So that's brilliant. Miranda, you're next on my screens.
Hi, I think I've met everyone on this call, but I'm Miranda and I'm a researcher at the New Economics Foundation. focusing on childcare.
Thank you, and all round general awesome person. And Catherine, you're the last but not least.
Oh, hi. And sorry I haven't got my video on. I've got a bit of a dodgy connection, so I think I'll disappear if I do turn it on. But my name's Kath, and I'm head of campaigns at the Women's Equality Party. So we've had quite a long-term campaign that predated COVID around the delivery of universal free childcare. And in recent months, we've been focusing a lot on the firefighting that other people have talked about, and our grassroots campaign teams are doing a lot of work at the moment to fight local nursery closures, and so we're just coming to get a bit of learning and discuss that, really.
Brilliant, thank you so much for that. So I guess that gives Lee a bit of context. I'm not going to do a big intro, Lee. I'm going to leave it to you to introduce yourself, and then to talk us through the work that you've been doing up in Salford. And then after the session, I mean, if people have got questions as you're going through, do post them in the chat, and then after the session we'll take questions more directly then, but probably best if we put ourselves on mute whilst Lee is talking.
Yeah, excellent, thank you, Lucy, and thank you everyone for joining. If you wanted to post any questions as we go through on the chat, I'm happy to, because I've got the chat window open, so if it's something particular on that, whatever subject I'm talking about, we can have a quick chat about that as we go through. Right, so I'm Lee, and we led a nurseries campaign that began in February 2018. So we have 5 council-run nurseries here in Salford, and they are, rather than nurseries attached to a school, they're full-day nurseries, and all funded through Salford City Council. All of them are Ofsted outstanding rated. So going back to Feb 2018, we all received a letter to say the council can no longer afford to fund these nurseries, and they would have to close at the end of August that year. So obviously anything like, particularly when there's a lot of SEND children that need to attend these, because the reason they're outstanding rated is because there's so much expect in those areas. We have a lot of children that come from families where English is a second language. So again, they're really good at bringing the children through and getting them school ready for when they leave. So obviously, as you'd expect with anything like this, there's quite a lot of initial support and an uproar, if you like, around the communities for a closure decision by Salford City Council. So luckily, I suppose, because they're all run by the council, they're very heavily unionised. So Unison, they've got high union density, and almost every member of staff that's there permanent has been there for a few months. Is in Unison. So we had the advantage early on that we had the couple of reps that represented the nursery workers. They started the organising, got people together. So what they asked for was from each of the 5 nurseries have 1 parent rep, and then and at least 1 staff rep, and then anyone else that wanted to join up. But that basically that would give us the core campaign team. And then they quite soon after the announcement, I think it was only about a week after, they organised a public meeting, and this was one where I think we had a capacity of about 250, and about 350 people turned up. So you could see the passion in the community. So and then Unison led that. We had a couple of parent speakers, a couple of nursery workers and managers speak at that, and then Salford City Mayor, who ultimately was his decision to close the nurseries, he spoke at that along with one of his member of staff. And from then on, we then arranged very, very quickly to, we started having meetings at the nurseries, getting people together on WhatsApp. So we'd have a kind of core campaign group, and then each local nursery had WhatsApp group, and we tried to basically recruit, make parents aware, because a lot of parents, they see the letter and they didn't really realise what that meant and what they could do about it, or just accept it and try and find another nursery kind of thing. So what we then did at that point was organise a march and a rally, and this only took around about 5 weeks from the initial public meeting to getting around about 1,000 people together on a march through Salford, and then a rally in front of Salford Civic Centre, which is your town hall for the council. And because of the, I suppose, the traction that we got so early, and the feeling in the community, on the eve of the rally, Salford City Council Mayor announced that he would fund the councils for a further few months, up until for another year, up until September 2019. So the kind of initial, we kind of got a very quick victory with Salford City Council, saying, look, the uproar here, the community feeling, the campaign we got together, and then so almost straight away we had that quick win, which gave us a year's worth of breathing space. So like I say, so then we get to the rally, huge rally, lots of parents. We were quite good in the sense that we'd bought something like 300 yellow T-shirts. We'd designed a logo. The guys who worked local, who worked for printing.com, was known to do kind of cost price printing, and we banners and things like that. So we had a lot of kind of material very quickly, if you like, to really spread the word. Banners up outside every nursery, and really kind of got the message out there what the council was proposing, and that we were campaigning against it. And from that rally, we also engaged, and this again was initially brought through Unison. We engaged the politicians. So we had Rebecca Long-Bailey, Angela Rayner, who you probably have heard of, and Barbara Keeley and Graham String, and the other couple of local Salford MPs, and they all spoke at the rally. And then Salford City Mayor Paul Dennett also spoke. But obviously at this point, we're saying, well, why you're the one that's made the decision to close the nurseries, and yet you're trying to basically blame shifting to central government. And he kind of said, Salford City Council, we've had funding cuts from 400 to 200 million, and all this is all through Tory austerity, and then this change in the schools grant, the straw that broke the camel's back, that meant that they were saying that they had to close the nurseries. So at that point, because of the kind of U-turn from the mayor, they decided, the council politicians, that they wanted to work with us as a campaign, and take this campaign to Parliament, central government, and put pressure on them to either increase either some direct funding, or review the earliest funding formula, or just somehow increase the funding for local nurseries, so we could keep the nurseries open that way. So at that point, a lot of us, as you'd expect, were not that keen on working with the council, who had brought this decision to close the nurseries, and only temporarily kind of funded them until September 2019. But we thought, well, it is probably our best chance to get anything, to really kind of push for a campaign. And I don't know whether you know the makeup of Salford City Council. It's majority Labour, and it's almost a proper socialist makeup of most of the councillors there. So it was something where politically they were on our side, and we were happy to kind of take that fight to the Tories and to Parliament. So that ends the first chapter. I don't know whether you got any questions at this point, if you want to stick it on the chat, about how we kind of got it off the ground and got the main campaign and rally going. Yeah, go.
I just wonder if you could, I think that point you were talking about parents, that some parents got the letter and just kind of assumed, oh, well, we'll just have to find a new place. And just if you could tell us a bit more about how you as a parent got hold of other parents and sort of helped them to see there might be scope to fight back, because I think that's quite a common experience too.
It was almost in the beginning, collaring every single parent as they came into the nursery, and I'd kind of go because it opened at 8 o'clock, so I was always there for opening, and I'd stay there extra 15 minutes, have a chat to the manager and the staff, and then any parents that were coming in, just let them know what the impact was, of the nurseries will close, but we've now got this campaign, and just letting them know the dates of the rallies and things like that, handing out the flyers and things. So it was really just to kind of make sure that the awareness and the realization that that they can do something about it, and this is what we were doing, and this is the support that we needed. And we did arrange a few other meetings where they were kind of one in the day, one kind of after work time, just in each separate nursery, just to almost a more informal kind of meeting, just to get people together and yeah, just to make sure that they were aware of what we can do with it. Okay, right, so I'll just, because I've got almost a makeshift auto cue with some notes in just above the screen here, so I'll just scroll this down a minute, so I don't miss anything out. So,
Kate, was there a question you wanted to ask as well?
Yeah, I think I might have forgotten it now. Yeah, I think I was just going to say, obviously, as you said, Paul Dennett is one of the more amenable, potentially, mayors, and Salford is kind of a bit more innovative in some of the things that it's done. But I wondered what kind of narratives you think worked with him. Was it about like shaming a kind of purportedly socialist Labour mayor, or was there a particular argument that you think kind of?
Yeah, it was a little bit, yeah, but obviously he made the decision to begin with, so he wasn't going to go back on it straight away. What we did, I mean, my day job's an accountant, so obviously a lot of these things revolve around finances. So I looked into the dedicated schools grant, looked into all the funding of the nurseries, and the early years funding formula, and how that filtered through, and what the cost of the nurseries were, and we kind of really pressed them. We were putting Freedom of Information Act, and then we were meeting with the council, cabinet members for finance, Paul Dennett, plus a few of the other councillors in the council chambers every week, with our Unison reps and the parent reps and everyone on the campaign group. And we really pushed them to say, look, if you're saying it's this is the reason, show us, what your decision's based on. And I think that kind of scared them a little bit, the fact that we almost knew more about the funding than they did, because obviously it goes through the childcare civil servant side, if you like, and then they make the political decisions. So we did really push that. I think it was always a case that they were, it's with a heavy heart, that type of attitude. We don't want to really close the nurseries, but we have no choice. And we were like, there must be a choice. We're not going to, we're not saying rob Peter to pay Paul here. What we're saying is you should not be closing any nurseries in Salford, particularly when so many families, vulnerable families, rely on them, and particularly because they're all outstanding rated.
I think Maud's got a question as well.
Thanks, Lee. Yes, I was just going to ask about the sort of union and community coalition, because you said that most of the people working in the nursery joined Unison, and that played a really significant role, and then how it sort of extended to include parents and other community leaders. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, from Unison's point of view, I mean, I think it was always a case of, get everyone involved. And then I think, as a trade union organiser, they know how to get people, they know what needs to be done. They have, so they used a lot of their contacts to get the rally together and things like that. So, and I think, the attitude that I saw in the nursery and was very much, in fact, one of the longest serving members of staff, her husband was a shop steward. So there's very much that kind of, collective, power to the people type of attitude in there. And also with being Salford City Council, they're all paid living wage, real living wage is a minimum. So there is that real kind of sense of, community looking after the staff, and not just kind of, stick your kids in for as cheap as possible, pay everyone minimum wage. So I think you do get that. And then, there's definitely, I mean, when you're looking for your child to go to a nursery, you kind of get that first impression, and it was definitely more of a family feel there, and they really looked after the kids. And I think, as Zoe mentioned earlier, that kind of it's more about the childcare than it is about getting people in and making a profit. And that you could definitely see that between the nurseries. Any other questions? Right, I'll move on to the chapter 2, I suppose. I shouldn't really call it chapters, but yeah. So I suppose at that point we'd got we got a good amount of support. We'd joined forces, if you like, with the council, but at the same time they were under consultation as to what they will do with the nurseries. So whether they were going to close a handful of them, whether they were going to look to privatise them, part privatise them. So they were basically everything was on the table at this point. So they were going to fight with us for the campaign, but also they needed to almost a means to an end. Can we get something sorted for the nurseries if we don't get any funding from central government? So at that point, Rebecca Long-Bailey was really key, because she then arranged a meeting actually above the House of Commons. So what we were trying to do was get a meeting with the DFE and a meeting with MPs to try and spread the word in Parliament to what the campaign was, what we were doing, and try and get more and more support from the politicians. So we took a bus load of people down to the House of Parliament, and we got a good number of MPs, vast majority Labour, with one Lib Dem, but no Tories, as you'd expect. So we kind of also said our piece. Paul Dennett came with us. A couple of the politicians as well as Rebecca Long-Bailey, and we kind of all said our piece about this is what we're looking to do. This is what we've done so far. The funding is from central government is the main problem, and so that kind of started the support, I suppose, on the politician side, because at that point then the DFE and no Tory ministers agreed to meet us. We decided to stage a protest outside the DFE, and I think this is where the kind of media coverage really stepped up, because previously we'd had kind of local papers, little bits of local media coverage, but then with that protest that we held outside the DFE, we got the banners. We'd even got, because I'm a big football fan, so I'd written a couple of songs that were based on football chants at the terrace. But then we'd kind of taken on the rally, and then we're singing those outside the DFE, all to do with saving nurseries and childcare. So that kind of created a bit of a stink, and we got 5 Live over, and they came over and interviewed a few of us and actually put us on as a feature on their kind of tea time news. So it really did. It was about a 10-minute feature. So it really did hit home with a lot of people that you shouldn't be closing nurseries because of central government funding cuts. So that at that point, we'd really kind of increased the media awareness, if you like. And I think off the back of that, that's why the early years minister, Nadeem Zahawi, at the time, that's why he then agreed to meet us the month later. So we kind of continued meeting with the council, input into what their consultation was, and putting our kind of demands together, that type of thing, which I'll come to in a sec. But so then we then took a smaller group down to London and met with Nadeem Zahawi. He gave us a graveyard 5 o'clock slot, and kind of we all we had a couple of parents, a couple of nursery workers, and the politicians with us on our side. And even though he said, "Oh, we'll do everything we can do to try and help," and it was basically lip service, and we heard nothing from him. So that was the kind of the politician support that we kind of got the meeting with the minister. But at that point, we kind of thought, well, it's not looking great for getting anything out of the Tory government at this point. So have you got any questions before we move on to the next part? No? Okay, let me just scroll down my little note. So that brought us into, so that was around, we went down to Parliament initially in April, and then we met at the DFE in May. So that brought us on to the summer. And at this point, we'd heard from the Tower Hamlets Nurseries campaign, because they were in a similar boat to us. Their nurseries, 3 nurseries down there that were threatened with closure. Labour-run council there as well. So very, very similar situation. So again, contacted through Unison. So we went down to Tower Hamlets and spoke at their first public meeting, just to let them know what we'd done so far and how we'd engage the politicians and move that forward. So and that kind of sparked up nursery campaign contacts from Birmingham and from Nottingham, and we almost then kind of joined forces as much as you can do, being that spaced out geographically. Again, setting up WhatsApp groups, just having chats. on the phone, and almost trying to build a national campaign. And obviously in the background, we're still in the middle of the consultation, with Salford City Council and what's happening, with the options for the nurseries off the back of that. So after that, in August, I then did a bit of research on any MPs that had spoke about childcare funding problems, nursery closures, in the House of Commons for anything, up to about the past 3 years, and contacted all of them and just said, look, this is what we do. We've got a national, we're building a national campaign here. Will you offer your support? And I had positive feedback from most of them. Again, not so much on the Tory side, but that included Lib Dems. We had Caroline Lucas as well. So we had quite a decent amount of cross-party support at that point. And then I arranged to meet a handful of Labour MPs at the conference in September, the one they had in Liverpool about then. More to kind of say, right, if you're meeting people face to face, you're making more noise, people remember you, know what your campaign's all about, and then to try and get things moving, because obviously we can only do so much from outside. That's where the decision makers are. Ultimately we want a decision, from the Chancellor to put some more funding in the budget into childcare. So that kind of gave us quite a lot of support, but again we were still on the opposition side. But I think getting that amount of support, nationally, cross-party to a certain extent, that made a huge difference to Salford City Council's view of what we were doing. And I think then when we moved then through the winter, at this point, Salford Council were looking at these are our, what we need it to look like if we are to privatise the nurseries. We as a campaign group then put together a list of 10 quite clear demands. Real living wage must continue, the childcare, SEND support, all these type of things we put together to say, if you are going to part privatise or fully privatise these nurseries, then you must meet all these demands, or you've then got another fight on your hands. As in, we're with you up until this point, but we need these demands to be met. And what then kind of continued as we went into the new year, so this is when we're getting to early 2019, was Salford City Council put it out almost to tender to say, right, which companies are interested. So we had one UK-wide company, large chain that was interested, one small local chain. And what they were seeing was, because most of the nurseries are in council-owned buildings, the deal would have almost have been, right, we'll cover the rates, the kind of heating, lighting bills, that type of thing. And then it almost got to the point where, what was this part privatisation going to do? And I think part of that, and the strength of our campaign, and the fact that we'd kind of got a lot of national support both from campaigners and politicians, they then made the decision in March of 2019 that they were going to take nursery closure off the table, and they were effectively, we'd save the nurseries at that point, which obviously was a great victory, for our campaign, because we'd saved the nurseries, but we'd not get anything from central government. So that's, I suppose, why I've continued with everything on the kind of national campaign, and any kind of childcare campaigns and anything that's come about since. And I suppose then we're pretty much very quickly into COVID and where we are now. So the current situation with Salford nurseries is they aren't at threat of closure. They are fully funded by Salford City Council, and they're almost, if you look at how the pandemic has gone, and they've remained, 4 of them remained open throughout the pandemic for key workers' children, and they've almost been a model, or like a beacon of how nurseries should run and operate. And if you can do this successfully, and you can do this, you can pay all your workers at least real living wage, you can create that good community and family atmosphere. This is what a nursery should look like. And I think from, I suppose, the future from now is they are a great model of how a nursery should look. But obviously there's a massive underfunding, on the central government side. So I suppose that brings everything right up to date. So I'm happy to take any questions and or any comments and have a chat about stuff now.
I think, sorry to go through the chat. Yeah, I mean, I just think the obvious question is I'm frankly really worried about where we're going to be over the next 12 months, 24 months, with the impact of this pandemic. So I'm really interested to know and how they've built in resilience, I guess, within that. It's great to hear about that good model. And I know Hackney works with Salford, so there's obviously a relationship there that I can find out more about. But yeah, how have they built in resilience in the face of the pandemic, I suppose, is the $60 million question.
It's a good question. I think resilience is in staff-wise or financial-wise, or just running it, or.
I think there's going to be a change, perhaps how nurseries and how childcare in general is used. Whether we're going to see more sort of part-time take up. It's generally how we're going to be predicting and moving with the change to employment, the change to the whole economy, really. So sorry, it probably is an impossible question. It just felt like the one that had to be put out there.
Yeah, and I think from their point of view, they were lucky in the fact that they're funded by Salford Council, and so when they kind of almost closed through early lockdown, they were able to keep things open, keep staff on rotas, still pay staff on furlough, and still pay them what they needed. So and then they were able to then take in children from other nurseries that are, the private nurseries that are closed. So, and I think for me, it's always having that protection there that if it's a public service, it should be something that's properly funded, rather than if you look at private nurseries, they were struggling straight off, weren't they? And they were struggling even before the pandemic. And then once you drop the pandemic and the private fees disappear, the children are at home with the parents, then they're really going to struggle, and that's why a lot of them are closed at that point. And almost, if there were no council-run nurseries here, where were the children going to go? From the key workers, I mean, there would have been nowhere for them to go. So yeah, it's definitely something that's helped, particularly in the early stages of the pandemic.
Xanthi, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. This is a question for Lee, sort of in your experience of the campaign, but also it's just something I've been trying to get my head around generally, because often what comes up in this situation is the inadequacy of the level of funding, particularly for the entitlement places. But I wonder to what extent, sort of in the policy arena and in the campaigning around early years, the question of the funding model itself and the way that the sector is funded comes up, and how much openness there is, across the political spectrum and also among providers and what have you, in terms of what you found, to actually start to re-examine how early years childcare is funded, that the sort of, the per child sort of basis of the funding, rather than other models, I suppose, that might focus more on actual long-term investment, which included overheads and wasn't so volatile, I suppose, because it's attached to individual children.
Yeah, and I think from my point of view, we saw from the start that the early years funding formula, is completely flawed. Like I say, the per child funding doesn't really work, and also, it's a kind of nothing until two means tested, and then all parents get it. I mean, from personal point of view, we both work, and then so when James got to age 3, basically our nursery fees just reduced massively, and that kind of it shouldn't be for that reason. It should be something where you say, right, these nurseries need this funding. It shouldn't be because it's almost that kind of trying to get people back to work, but it only really benefits the people that will probably end up being back at work anyway. It really is a kind of a flawed principle fundamentally, and also the fact that they've not increased the rate at all. So yeah, every single nursery, private and public sector, have taken a cut, an inflationary cut every single year. So yeah, I think that the whole model is wrong. And like you say, looking at individual children funding, but only at certain ages, it should be looked at as a whole, and providing care from babies and upwards, really, because that's when if you're a working mother, you're looking to go back to work generally, after maternity leave, or quite soon after that, not necessarily. Give it another year or so till I can get the funding till the child's age 3, and then go to nursery. So yeah, there's a lot of things really for me where the earliest funding formula just doesn't work at all.
Just to follow up, thanks for that. Just to follow up, was it the kind of thing that came up in the discussion within the campaign? Like, does it seem? Yeah. So
I think initially when we were discussing with the Suffolk City Council and our own campaign group, it was definitely something that it was looking at, because they cited the dedicated schools grant and the changes in that policy that were the reasons why the nurseries should close. So we looked at a lot of that, discussed about how the funding was put together and how that filtered through from central government, then through local government in various different guises, and through the private fees, through the DSG grants, and then through EUIFF. So it was something that we kind of saw early on that it wasn't adequate, and that's something that we were fighting for, because I suppose partway through the campaign, it was almost private. You'll probably be aware of the Champagne Nurseries on Lemonade funding Facebook group, and it was almost, that's heavily private nurseries in there, and they're almost getting against it, saying like, oh, why should you get this and we don't? But we were saying, well, no, it's we know there's a problem across the board, private and public care nurseries. What we want to do is try and campaign together, and then this will be a solution that benefits everyone, benefits all the children and all the nurseries. And I think trying to get that message across was quite difficult to begin with. I ended up having Facebook Messenger chats, privately with some of the private nursery owners, just to kind of get our point across without, what Facebook commenting is like. People start piling in. It's hard to get that message across. So I kind of spoke to them, and then it kind of calmed down, and they got more on board with us. So it's definitely something that it was a large focus, because as with anything, it's the financials that drive the nursery stays open or has to close.
Maud, you've got your hand up. Did you want to ask something?
Thank you. Yes, it was following on from what you were talking about, Lee, about the sort of fragmentation of the sector, because in Bristol, our children's centres that have nurseries in them haven't faced the same level of closure, because our Mayor Martin Rees, when he was elected on a promise of not closing any children's centres. But what's happening at the moment is that the grant maintained nursery schools, which are located in the most deprived parts of the city and also the countryside, they're facing closure now. So obviously building a sort of national campaign that speaks to those very different statuses that nurseries have, even outside the private sector, seems like, so I was just curious, sorry if I missed it, what the status of the Salford nurseries were, because I know you said they were city council run or supported.
Yeah, so I mean, I suppose it's worth clarifying, because we had this quite a lot with the campaign. You got your nursery schools that are always attached to the school and teacher-led, and they when they changed the funding on the DSG, this is going back, I think 2016 when they changed. There was a huge funding problem for nursery schools, because they basically lost a lot because of that change. And then the government then provided supplementary funding just to nursery schools. And then if you look at, they are then separate to local authority day nurseries, which is what R5 are here in Salford. So I mean, I suppose to answer your question, they're not in the education area as would nursery schools be, and they're fully funded by by the local authority and by parents' fees.
Oh, Zoe, do you want to go?
Well, that's the question I was going to ask you actually. Were we talking about day nurseries or nursery schools? So it is day nurseries you're talking about, and it's really interesting because we had a quite dissimilar situation in Milton Keynes. They had 9 day nurseries operated by the council. They closed one by the back door, as it were. The building suddenly became not fit for purpose, and they temporarily moved the children into one of the other nurseries, and the parents there kicked up a real stink, and the council, I think, just thought they would go away. In the end, they misunderstood the parents, and actually it took us, because we ended up getting involved in it, helping them to reopen the nursery, although it wasn't then a council nursery, but it took about 6 or 7 years. So the original parents committee, their children had all gone to school, but they carried on campaigning anyway. It was quite hilarious. But we did finally win a battle to get funding from the council to reopen that nursery. Of their 9 nurseries, that was the only one that was outstanding, but that's the one they closed because it was the smallest and it wasn't financially viable. But they then put out for tender half of the nurseries, and that was quite a political fun and games. And they're now, I suspect I've heard on the grapevine, looking at how they can dispose of the other nurseries. The nurseries they ended up keeping were the ones that had children's centres attached. But the big stumbling block they now have, and this says it all really, is the fact that because the staff are on local authority contracts, that makes them unaffordable for the PVI sector to take on the TUPE responsibilities. So I know the what used to be called the Preschool Learning Alliance, the Early Years Alliance, they've taken on quite a few nurseries from local authorities, and they've got to the point now where they can't take on any more because the local authority terms and conditions are not affordable at the kind of rates that they can afford to pay their staff and charge fees. So you're right, the funding model doesn't work unless you pay peanuts or you're in an affluent area and you charge a fortune. And that's why the big private chains focus all their efforts on putting nurseries in affluent areas. They're really not interested in the less affluent areas. We took over a nursery from one of the big chains who pulled out of running a nursery without telling anybody until the last minute, and it was the parents there that got in touch with us to say, can you save our nursery? Unfortunately, we were able to get the local employers involved in sorting that out, so we managed to reopen that. But it's quite iniquitous how it works at the moment, and I'm all my hat off to you for succeeding in saving it. And I suspect, you know, you've bought some time, and whether that's long-termly sustainable. But can I just ask, in terms of the fee rates that the council then charge, because presumably they charge for the childcare side of it, how is that compared to other nurseries in that area?
It's much lower. So to give you an idea, a private nursery around here, you're looking around about 50 quid a week, and they were charging 50 quid a week? No, 50 quid a day, sorry. And then and then it was £38 when a day when James went there. I mean, he's at school now, so yeah, there was a good chunk difference. And really, the people who need it the most, the low income families, they couldn't afford to put their kids in a private nursery. And a lot of the parents that were with us, like in the early days of the campaign, were saying, if you close these nurseries, the difference in the cost basically means that I will have to give up work. And so you've got that side of things, as well as the kind of quality of the childcare and the staff side of things. You've also got the fact that a lot of parents are able to then put the children in nurseries because the fees are lower. And so I think, like I say, it's looking at that whole model that you mentioned about the PVI sector. That's one of the reasons that Salford Council couldn't part privatise or fully privatise, because the TUPE agreements, it would be too expensive for private companies to sign up to it. So but it doesn't say that's wrong. It's right for for all the nursery workers to have at least earn at least real minimum wage. And the solution has to be, I think, focused on the organisation of staff, and those rates as a minimum, and there has to be some public funding subsidy, a better model than we've got now.
Can I just quickly ask, I'm conscious of time, so we should wrap up in a few minutes, but just if you could tell us a bit more about the union involvement as well, because that feels like it was that they were available to do some of the real heavy lifting, although it was really important that parents were very much kind of part of and leading the work. And you talked about the connections into those different areas in Tower Hamlets and Birmingham and Nottingham. Were the unions kind of equally present in those areas too? And then part of that question also, does it feel like a national campaign, or does it feel like a series of local campaigns that are banding together, but the pressure points are each kind of on what's going on locally? I don't know if that's
I think definitely it's a series of local campaigns rather than a national campaign. And I think Unison, they made the contact with Tower Hamlets. I think GMB were in Birmingham, and then it was just an independent guy, not union related, from Nottingham. And but I think it's going back to your original question about the involvement. They were the main drive, I would say, initially of getting the campaign going. I think if it hadn't been for the union organisers, we would have struggled, because it would have been maybe me and a couple of parents, and maybe like three or four of the nursery staff and managers. So I think having that initial impetus to organise and to try and having that experience to get everyone together and know what to do next, if you like, and then the engagement with the politicians, because obviously Salford Unison here have run quite a lot of campaigns, as you might expect here, and because everything's public sector linked, they do have good relations with our politicians. So I think we definitely would have struggled, I think, to get the engagement from the politicians. And I think having them there, but like I say, they can't do it on their own. They're the organiser and facilitator, and then it needs passionate parents and nursery workers and managers to get on board to really push it and try and get your campaign going. But I think definitely without them, I mean, actually inspired me to put myself forward, because I'm in CWU and I'm now a rep because of what we did with the campaign. And I think just making that difference, that does get that organisation together, particularly early on.
Yeah, that it's so helpful to kind of to hear that as well. I think it was really interesting hearing from Dara about the union's kind of very methodical, focused approach to unionising staff, and the difference there in Ireland felt like they were saying we'll go to the private sector providers as well, whereas it feels like union presence in England is still much more focused on those kind of local authority, whether they're the maintained nurseries or those that are kind of more closely seen as public service nurseries. And yet 84% of the private voluntary sector ones. So getting into those as well feels so critical.
Just to give you an example as well, my friend, his wife, she works at a nursery, and she's the only union member at that nursery. She tried to get her colleagues involved and get them signed up, and they just didn't seem to be interested. I think because the cost of union membership, when you're earning minimum wage, is quite a lot, and a lot of people don't see the benefit in it. And also, if there's one of you, you need 3/4 of your staff really to be unionised, to then have the effect, I suppose. But I mean, she basically had that experience of they don't care about the kids, and she left that nursery and moved to because I think it was at Busy Bees, I think she worked for, and so she's left there and gone to it's a more kind of 4 or 5 local chain, if you like, and she said it's far better there. So and it definitely it makes the difference. You look at the happiness of the staff, then feeds through to the filters through to the kids, and that's what you want, isn't it? You don't want the staff just kind of sitting there going through the motions, earning minimum wage and not being happy with it.
Caroline, I'm not going to put you on the spot at all, but I guess sort of one of the things that's coming through, I think, or sort of thinking about developing a national campaign around or campaign for better childcare, is also kind of looking at where the crisis points might be coming in the next 12, 18 months, and how they may be trigger points for mobilising. And as Catherine was talking about, Women's Equality Party members kind of locally are very much in firefighting mode because closures are starting to come through. And you look at the data at the minute, 1 in 4 nurseries, according to Early Years Alliance, expecting to be closed by Christmas. And I suspect strongly those that manage to stay open are going to have to look really closely at what they're charging, because many of them have taken out loans or running at a deficit at the moment just to keep the doors open. So from an outsider perspective, you know, closures and fees going up are kind of potential crunch points. But I wonder from a kind of local authority perspective, because what it feels like Lee's story also tells us is there's real power when parents and workers are aligned with local authorities to push back nationally and recognise where the real heart of the problem is. It's not about kind of squeezing a bit more money out of local authorities because the structures of funding are so broken. But I don't know if you'd want to kind of offer us where there might be some kind of big crunch points from a local authority perspective.
I mean, I think we are in a crunch moment. Clearly, you know, we're all looking at our budgets, at shortfalls that we're going to be carrying forward. We're looking at what the state of play is going to be next year, and we're, you know, extremely worried. So I think we are looking at, I suppose, ways of being transparent about that, and sort of ensuring that there is engagement if we have to make difficult decisions, that it's not through the back door, and that, yeah, if there's campaigns to be done with central government, that's done wholeheartedly with the right people and is effective. But the whole point of our funding formula review that we're doing now is to kind of look at how we can create something that's not almost designing settings to fail. You know, that seems to be the really awful situation that we've been in, whether it's in children's centres, or whether it's across the whole of special educational needs, or pretty much, you know, the key aspects of my portfolio anyway. It seems that almost every area of work that we're doing, there are just big lump sums that we don't write into the budgets in the first place, and then nonetheless have to find. And we are not in the position now with this pandemic of dipping endlessly into reserves. You know, Hackney is far more resilient than a lot of other councils, so we'll do the best we can. But I think that kind of honesty, transparency, we have a problem. If we have to reset, then let's make sure we're going to reset in a way that is rich and sustainable in terms of the offer that we can make, is my approach. But I realise that's maybe not very specific, but I'm really happy to have follow-up conversations, you know, and I think it's really incredibly helpful that this network's being put together, and that there's some sort of ambitious thinking that comes in, you know, because the fear is, I think, for every local authority, is that you're going to be salami slicing. And I just think there has to be clear-headed, honest, strategic work, even if that's not, you know, as ambitious and as hopeful as some people might like to see. But, you know, I'm a terribly optimistic person, so I'm just going to have to hope for the best and listen to as many people as I can, you know, in terms of the work that we do locally, and also team up with other authorities. And you know, very interested in that cohort of MPs. I do think we are seeing quite strong advocacy, particularly around the Early Years Alliance and Tulip, Sadiq, and, you know, but I'd be really interested to know who was on your list, Lee.
Yeah, I'm happy to share it actually.
Yeah.
I'll put the list of the ones that didn't reply. But just a quick point on the high level local authority funding. Paul Dennett, they're in like a local authority alliance, and I'm not sure exactly what they call it, but they've been looking specifically here alongside Salford University at needs-based funding. So basically, at the moment, the way that central government divvy up the funding, you well know this, isn't fair. You know, the home counties get quite a lot, you know, and it's because, particularly in the north, when council tax income is lower, rates income is lower, and they've been looking at evidence-based kind of where the deprivation and the need is, that's where funding is directed, and that's something that they were developing back in 2019. I've been out of the loop, I suppose, with the council, with Paul Dennett, for the past year or so. But you can see when he was on, when they made the statement with Andy Burnham, when they were looking at the COVID response for Tier 3, that was a small part of that evidence-based. We've done this modelling. We know where the funding must go, and that then does wrap in childcare, because if you have the funding going to the local authorities, then you can operate local authority day nurseries, then you have that support for the childcare sector, and it goes to where the need is, and it goes to where the higher levels of deprivation get the funding that they need.
Yeah, I think that one of the bits that stood out to me so far is sort of from the children's sector and some of the big children's charities, the push around levelling up, and I think a lot of the women's sector kind of push towards childcare is about work and productivity, and we're perhaps kind of missing that second absolutely critically important thing that childcare does. And probably with this government, levelling up would maybe kind of be quite a useful stick to be beating them with a little bit as well. So sort of trying to kind of weave both of those elements in feels really important for a future campaign. I'm conscious of everyone's time and that we should probably wrap up, but just if there are any sort of last comments or contributions people want to make, do jump in now, and I'll send a wrap up at the end so everyone gets everybody else's email addresses as well. Kate, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to Lee for presenting, and I think it's such a good example of being able to overcome that constant refrain, which is that local government's hands are tied, which they are, but that's why it has to go back to central government, and it's quite rare actually that you see campaigns that do that successfully. So I think that like scaling up is really impressive and is a really good example. And then I just want to say to Caroline that hopefully in our project, one thing we want to do is look at that relationship between work and employment and childcare, and we're hoping that we'll be able to do some kind of projections about what it will look like in 6 months' time and then in 12 months' time, and really be able to use that for like policy for people in local government to be able to kind of use as a bit of leverage. So yeah, we hope to be able to give some of the kinds of information that you were kind of asking about.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. Next Tuesday, like I said, Veronica will do a session on organising with nannies and au pairs, and the particular theme of all of that is also the experience of migrant workers through COVID, and what kind of future changes to the childcare sector might look like. There's been a massive growth in informal childcare or one-to-one home-based childcare, suggestions that that's going to replace group settings, and real challenges there around ensuring it's good quality and fair on the people who are working there, and that the contract between parent and employee is right, but also real risks around all of those individual workers not having a common voice or being seen or heard. So there's lots of interesting stuff for Veronica to pick up on as well. But thank you all very much for your time, and I'll send a link around after this. But yeah, keep safe, everyone. See you
Thanks,
soon.
Lucy. Thank you,
Thanks,
thank you, Lee. Thank you, Lucy. Bye.
Take care. Good luck with the lockdown, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lee.
Bye.
Thanks so much, Lee.
Thanks.
Thanks, Lucy.